Putin spoke about how the war could end, Lukashenko reveals details of secret negotiations with the West. And 3 more countries can send their armies to fight against the armed forces of Ukraine. The most important interesting news for this hour is on the air of Nekta. Threats to Skobiva's spouse, passions are running high in the State Duma. Representatives of the Caucasus are against Popov. Eggs and butter from Erdogan. Turkey is trying to save Russia. How butter became the #1 problem. Lukashenko again talks about contacts with the West, and Putin calls up with the president of one of the European countries, and shares military plans. What is happening, and why territorial concessions are being discussed again? Friends, good morning. I will be glad to see your like, subscribe and repost. You know very well that this is very important for us. Also leave your comments and thank you for your feedback. I'm starting to talk about current and important events right now. The Western military industry is not able to produce even close to the required number of artillery shells for Ukraine. The Washington Post writes about this with reference to the words of analyst Anatoly Livin. In publications devoted to what the world will be like after the US elections and the global struggle of democracy against autocracy, Russia's war against Ukraine is mentioned several times. The authors of the material write that next year the harsh reality of this conflict may lead to a scenario in which the Russian Federation will have an advantage. Western support is weakening, and the United States cannot provide either Israel or Ukraine with a sufficient amount of air defense. The prospect that Ukraine will compromise with Russia, ceding territories in exchange for certain Western security guarantees, is becoming more and more real. This will lead to an unsatisfactory peace that will stir up European politics for years. It seems that Trump is favorable to this outcome. His advisors openly talk about the need to focus us strategic resources on the confrontation with China. The Washington Post also clarifies that the confrontation between the United States and China for Republicans is not a struggle between democracy and autocracy, but a traditional rivalry of great powers, further quote, which corresponds to Trump's broader policy in the spirit of both yours and ours. I note that recently the Western press has been writing very often about options for ending the war, when Ukraine will have to make territorial concessions. The Ukrainian position on this issue is clear. The office of the President of Ukraine has repeatedly said that they are not ready for so-called territorial compromises, even in exchange for joining NATO. The phone conversation took place. The Serbian president admitted that in October he called Putin for the first time in the last 2.5 years. Alexander Vučić told the details of the conversation in an interview with Bloomberg. He says that he warned Putin that he would not be able to accept his invitation to the BRICS summit, and also decided to talk about the end of the war. But Putin, apparently, does not want to finish it. Vučić said that the Kremlin responded to the ceasefire proposal. All the goals of the special military operation, as he put it, will be fulfilled. Vučić, who does not support sanctions against Russia and continues to balance between the West and maintaining relations with the Kremlin, is confident that the next US president needs to achieve a truce in Ukraine, which is necessary not only for Kiev and Moscow, but this truce also corresponds to the highest interests of the West, Bloomberg quotes Vučić. The Serbian president believes that it will be difficult for both Putin and Zelensky to accept the US offer. But this is supposedly the only way to end the conflict. Lukashenko continues to talk about how he conducts behind-the-scenes negotiations with the West and knows what the Western world wants. The self-proclaimed makes a hint that they even reveal secrets to him that indicate how the war will end. My last contacts, I've talked about this a couple of times, with smart representatives of the civilized West say that we have a certain tilt. The West finally, based on what I know, realized that it is necessary to negotiate in Ukraine. Well, roughly speaking, I say so in a sporty way. It's possible to be a niche if today. In addition, at the Minsk conference, Lukashenko complained about Western sanctions, asking the question, what does the dictatorship and he personally have to do with it? Let me remind you that Lukashenko's actions have been driving the country into the sanctions list for many years. We are talking about both the falsifications in the presidential elections and the events during the protests of the 2020 year. In addition, already in the 22nd year, Lukashenko provided the territory of the Republic for the troops of the occupation army of the Russian Federation, who later invaded Ukraine from the territory of Belarus. 3 more countries can send their soldiers to participate in the war on the side of the Russian occupation army. This was stated by former US State Department official David Tafuri. He believes that the military of Iran, Syria, and even China will potentially be able to fight against Ukraine. In this case, these countries would satisfy Russia's needs for people. Meanwhile, the South Korean Defense Ministry says that the DPRK is changing its soldiers to advanced military, in particular Russian nuclear technologies, and that is why they are ready to send their soldiers to the front. Seoul said that this is a good deal for Pyongyang, since by sending North Koreans to die on the front line, Kim Jong-un will get everything necessary to improve intercontinental ballistic missiles, nuclear submarines, and reconnaissance satellites. At the same time, Russia continues to deny the presence of North Korean troops on its territory. In the UN Security Council, Russia's permanent representative Nay Benza said that all intelligence statements are unfounded. At the same time, the representative of Ukraine spoke about the scheme by which Moscow is trying to hide the presence of the DPRK in the war. It is assumed that the DPRK military personnel will wear Russian uniforms and use Russian small arms. They will also be issued Russian identity cards. To hide their presence, North Korean military personnel are expected to be integrated into Russian units, staffed by representatives of ethnic minorities from the Asian part of Russia. Residents of the European Union should prepare and provide themselves and their families with everything necessary to live 72 hours in a crisis situation. This is a recommendation contained in the report on strengthening the civil and military support of the European Commission, writes Deutsche Welle. In particular, the EU clarifies that citizens of the Union should have stocks in case of situations such as cyber attacks or sabotage. The German press writes that the authors of the report recommend developing instructions for citizens to provide themselves with basic necessities, as well as in case of chemical, biological, or nuclear incidents. The day before, European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen said that a single click could disable the power grid and plunge entire cities into darkness. Let me remind you that the intelligence services of Western countries are preparing for a war of the Russian Federation against NATO. But they believe that first of all, it will not be an open military clash. Russia will attack European countries in cyberspace and with the help of sabotage. Showdown in the State Duma of the Russian Federation. Skobiva's husband, propagandist and part-time deputy Popov claims that he is threatened by another people's deputy from Dagestan, by Sultan Kamzev. The intensity of passions arose because of the words Popov said on the air of his own talk show. He decided to support the publicist Vitaly Tretyakov, who in turn condemned Kamzev for his behavior towards officials from the Vladimir region, who banned the wearing of niqabs and hijabs in schools. Popov now claims that Kamzev called him and threatened him. Unfortunately, he does not disclose details. I do not know if a person, a deputy, he, not a deputy, spoke to me like that. I would simply leave the hall in the mildest case. From his own. Yes, they would have sent me far away. Some elected representatives of the people believe that they can do more than others. They're wrong. Their superiors often explain to them that they are wrong, including in the State Duma. Second, there are among the chosen of the people, I am not afraid of this word, hypagers. Unfortunately, the citizen you listed is such a person and works for clicks. It only works to ensure that his messages, mentions are viewed on social networks. Let me remind you that just last week, the Vladimir region was the first in the Russian Federation to ban wearing niqabs and hijabs in schools. After that, the State Duma deputies from Chechnya and Dagestan tried to put pressure on the authorities of this region, claiming discrimination. Kadyrov even promised, further quote, to clearly explain religious traditions and why they should not be banned. What do you think about this showdown in Russia, and how far can it go? Write about it in the comments. Turkey is saving Russia. Tens of tons of butter, which Ankara has already sent to the Russian Federation, should stabilize the situation on the market. The Roselkhaznadzor reports on the first deliveries. An incredible number of memes on this topic have already appeared on the web. One of the main ones is that Erdogan's butter came after the eggs from Erdogan. Russians recall that it was Turkey that saved the Russian Federation in January of this year with eggs, but now with another product, cream. The Ministry of Agriculture of Russia stated that it is taking measures to increase imports of butter from friendly countries in order to saturate the domestic market and stabilize prices. The Mesh Telegram channel reports that Iran, India, Kyrgyzstan, and Azerbaijan will also soon join the oil supplies. Let me remind you that recently in Russia cases of thefts of butter from stores have become more frequent due to a strong increase in prices. Recently, a man threatening with a knife took out 25 packs of butter from the store. After that, stores began to hide the oil in special containers with chips, so that it would be more difficult for thieves to steal the product. Friends, that's it. Don't forget to leave your like and comment, but the team and I continue to follow the most important news. As always, look for operational information from net in our Telegram channels or on the X platform. Thank you for your trust, for staying with us. See you soon and have good news.